Do you remember Talking Tom? I bet I unlocked a repressed memory just now. Created by Slovenian game studio Outfit 7 in 2010, Talking Tom's premise was simple. You say something to your phone, and then the funny cartoon cat says it back but high-pitched. Rinse and repeat several times over, and that's your new infinite money glitch. The franchise has since become a massive success, with over 18 billion downloads across dozens of apps and games. In fact, it got so popular that it spawned toys, merchandise, brand deals, web series, and the topic of this video, a TV show. I personally have never had a connection with the series except for liking the Talking Ben memes that blew up around last year, but I remember that my friends really liked these games back in the day. Before I wrote this video, I thought there was only the actual TV show that I found on Canadian Netflix, but like I said, there have been multiple web series before and after it, so I thought I'd give a brief rundown of a few of these. In 2012, Outfit 7 collaborated with Disney of all companies to make a Talking Tom web series called Talking Friends. It's not good. I tried watching a couple of the 3-minute shorts, and everything about this series screams misguided. The animation tries to be overly detailed to look similar to the games, but because of its budget of practically nothing, it's stiff and comes off as uncanny. The humor isn't funny and relies on poorly aged internet references, and the voices are so grating to hear, mostly because they put pitch shift effects on the voices, which to be fair is accurate to the games, but it still hurts to listen to. The only thing of note you should take away from this series is that the parrot is a gamer. Otherwise, this show has nothing going for it.
Take that, noob! Cool! That was so realistic!
All the other series are cheap fodder made for the Cocomelon crowd. I'm not even gonna bother with those. I mostly brought up Talking Friends in particular because 3 years later, a spiritual successor would come in the form of the TV show Talking Tom and Friends, which inherits quite a lot of the stuff established in the previous web series, but notably lacked the involvement of Disney and was instead animated by multiple outsourced studios. The show would run for a respectable 6 years before finally ending in 2021 with around 160 11-minute segments to its name. Was it worthy of such a long run though? Let's find out. In 2013, just over a year after the previous series was cancelled, Outfit 7 announced that they were working with producer Joe Ansolaba here, definitely butchered that name, who had previously done work for Rugrats, Johnny Test, and would later work on Smiling Friends of all things, on a Talking Tom TV show called Tom on the Road, expected to premiere by the end of 2014. 2014 came and went, and by the very end of the year, the pilot dropped, with the promise that the series would be doing weekly episodes starting in spring 2015. However, production of the series was handed over to Screen 21, the creative division of BRB International. Season 1 is honestly kind of a modest start to the series. It's a pretty basic watch these characters get into wacky hijinks sort of show at first, though it has the added twist of being a sort of parody of reality shows such as... I don't know, I don't watch reality TV. It adds kind of this sort of self-awareness that many other shows don't really try, at least at the time. Sometimes there are scenes where characters will be talking to a camera and giving exposition, and while that might come off as a bit lazy, at least the format allows them to disguise it a bit better. They ran with the whole reality show thing for a while before completely abandoning it randomly in the middle of the show's run, which sucks because it was kind of unique. It's especially interesting how they use this format to get around budgetary restrictions and writing flaws by recontextualizing it in ways that don't make it seem as obvious. The animation also has that illumination-like quality to it, where it looks pretty good, but you can kind of tell that it was made on the cheap. For what it is, it's fluid and expressive enough that it complements the bright and colorful art style. The series consists of 5 main characters, and they all follow some pretty general archetypes. Tom is quite literally the main character. His entire personality is that he's the main character, not just of the series, but to his world as a whole, which would normally kind of piss me off, but I don't really care enough to be bothered. It actually kind of comes off as funny in a sort of unintentional way. You also have Ben, who is the nerd, and Angela, who is the girl and potential love interest of Tom. We'll get back to that later. You also have Ginger, who is the spoiled kid, and brand new character Hank, who is the lazy one. Did you know that he's voiced by Tom Kenny, the voice of SpongeBob? Speaking of voices, they sound so much better here. They're not as accurate to the games, but they still sound nice, and they fit the characters' newly found personalities well. Oh, and if you're wondering about Tom Kenny, this is what he sounds like.
Well, I couldn't decide if I wanted tacos, spaghetti, or burgers. So I combined them all. I call it the Taco Spaghetti Burger, TSB for short.
There are also a set of recurring characters that all have their own unique traits, and while they're quite one-dimensional, it's at least nice to see a good variety. There's the CEO, who acts as a sort of arch rival to the main five, both in business and as a general adversary. Oh yeah, did you know that Tom and friends all run a small business together in their garage? Talk about David versus Goliath. The real question is, what is he even the CEO of? It's that. His real name is Carl, by the way. There's the landlord, who is an old guy. There's MC, who is the party guy, and I like his design. And my personal favorite side character is Xenon, who is Ben's Discord GF. I'm not kidding, that's literally what she is delegated to past her introduction episode. Ben really secured a Discord kid, and I wonder what servers he moderates. There are a ton of side characters I haven't even mentioned yet, and they all sport the same sort of one-note archetypes. The writing of the show is pretty much what you'd expect from an average kid's cartoon from the early to mid 2010s, but surprisingly, the writing doesn't make me want to bash my head through a wall. That is to say, the writing is very average. I didn't laugh much, but I also didn't cringe much either, so it literally is in the middle. The humor is just there. One of the characters will say something kinda wacky, and one of the other characters, it literally doesn't matter which one, will question the thing that was just said. There's a bit of gross out, there's a bit of slapstick, there's a bit of meta. Really, this show will just take any route it can to be funny, which is probably a good route to take for comedy. While it barely ever slam dunks, it also barely ever faceplants either. It's just there. The plots for the episodes are pretty basic and formulaic as well, with some of them being Tom loses his voice, Hank raises money to buy burgers, Tom gets addicted to social media, Ben falls in love, Ben tries to get a high score, and oh my god, is that Flappy Bird? Ben becomes fat. Really not helping the Discord mod comparison there, aren't we? And an ungodly amount of Angela and Tom romance episodes. We'll get there in a bit. There are even a handful of multi-parters as well. The main theme of this season is mostly just establishing the characters and watching them go on antics. There's also a small side thing about Tom's romantic feelings towards Angela, which is discovered a bit with the whole will they, won't they relationship they share for the entire season up until literally the last episode where they're officially a couple, which to be fair is further than quite a lot of shows go in terms of romance or even changing up the status quo at all. In fact, changing up the status quo is something that the show likes to do a lot, shown mostly by the amount of story arcs that are present in the show. Yeah, there's lore to the Talking Tom TV show. Are you keeping up yet? In fact, there's an unsettling amount of lore to this show. It's actually kind of concerning how much someone clearly cared about the lore of a TV show that was meant to be a tie-in to some mobile game series. More of this lore starts popping up around season 2, actually. Speaking of which... Can I start off by saying that the way Talking Tom stands in this picture is literally the most thug gangster ass shit, like holy hell, it's so badass. Seasons 2 and 3 are more of the same. Is that a bad thing? Not at all. Though this does make this section a bit shorter than the others. Pretty much everything I said about season 1 applies here. However, like I said earlier, there's more lore to the following seasons, with a bunch of multi-parters and a few overarching stories. Some things have also improved too, such as the creativity of the episode concepts. As I said earlier, I like the sort of self-aware direction that the show tried to take in its earlier seasons, and it kind of made it stand out to me since not many kids shows do that. It feels like season 1 was both the team getting used to their craft while at the same time establishing the world and its characters, so they can go way harder with the crazy ideas and creativity for the next 2 seasons. It allows for something akin to Sonic Boom, where there are episodes that poke fun at different aspects of the culture surrounding the source material, even if it does feel a bit off at times in comparison. Like, there's the episode Space Conflict. I wonder what that's a reference to. And while it could have easily tried to make a parody of the actual source material, it decides to go a different route and tackles fandom culture instead, pointing out the gatekeeping and self-centeredness that plagues a lot of fanbases online. Or how about Hero Hank? The episode's basically a sort of nod to old-school cop movies, and it's straight up self-aware about that. Hank's motive is that he wants to be like the characters he sees on TV when he's given a janitor/security guard job at a convention. On top of that, there's also a somewhat intriguing satire on collection culture, particularly taking aim at Pokemon cards and how notorious the resale market is for that. How about one more example? In Bye Bye Bongo, Hank is devastated when he hears the news that his favorite detective show gets cancelled, and uses Ben's TV transportation device to go to the world of the show in hopes of getting it uncancelled. Through a parody of said detective shows, both Hank and the main characters of this fictional show must find a way to get Hank home before their worlds collide. It's neat that the animation style completely changes to 2D for the segments that take place within this show. It's a creative touch that makes this episode a lot more memorable, and there's some pretty neat jokes as well, such as the implication that Talking Tom and Friends is a TV show in the world of the detective show. As you can see, the individual episodes have gotten more creative after Season 1, but on top of that, Season 2 and 3 start to integrate more overarching stories into the mix as well. Season 2, for example, has an arc where Tom tries to become mayor of the city in order to stop the CEO, who also wants to become mayor, to kick Tom out. It also has a continuation of the love plot from the first season, which delves more into the awkwardness and getting used to the whole relationship thing. Season 3 gets even crazier with the lore, now making stuff such as Tom's role as the mayor of the city, his relationship with Angela, and his rivalry with the CEO as consistent parts of the show, which shows the amount of dedication they had to making sure the show's continuity stayed consistent even despite its episodic nature. The big main multi-part event in this season is what's dubbed as the Destroy the World trilogy, a trio of episodes that span about half an hour with relatively high stakes and lots of action. Tom and Ben unleash monsters onto the world because they cheated at a video game that they were salty at losing in. Yeah, now we're edging into regular show territory here. This show is very weird. But for the most part, things remained relatively the same for the rest of the show until around Season 4. Speaking of which... Season 4 saw a major shift in the show's production, because starting with this season, the animation studio that was responsible for the show's visuals had changed hands. In the first 3 seasons, animation was handled by ARX Anima, an animation studio from Austria that had a long-lasting relationship with Outfit 7, doing animation for other kinds of promotional material of the Talking Tom series. Yeah, they just replaced them with newcomer People Moving Pixels, based in Spain, starting with Season 4. Seasons 4 and 5 are literally the only work the studio has ever gone. It's pretty obvious that the studio's changed hands because of budget cuts. ARX aren't really the bastions of TV animation either. The other work listed on their website looks like the kind of mockbuster movies you'd find in the bargain bin at the dollar store. But somehow, People Moving Pixels seems to be even lower budget than that. They don't even have a proper website, just a WordPress page with their name slapped onto it. Is it really an animation studio or a team of animators in a trench coat? Okay, you get the idea. Though surely, the Talking Tom fandom probably has these seasons split into eras, similarly to how other cartoon fan bases do it. I guess what we've seen thus far is the ARX era, and now we're about to enter the People Moving Pixels era. Right off the bat, you can tell a lot about the show is different, and that's likely in large part due to the previously speculated budget cuts I mentioned earlier. But some of the most notable differences include more serialized stories, slower release schedule, cheaper feeling animation and art, shuffling of the voices for some side characters, new recurring characters, which are for the most part animals by the way, which is weird to me because previously almost all the side characters were humans. They started pulling more from the game series and they even redesigned the main cast to fit. Yeah, this is interesting. On one hand, this season is so different in almost every conceivable way that it doesn't even really feel like the same series anymore. But on the other hand, just enough about it is the same for me that I can't really call it a reboot. This feels like sort of an alternate universe or time skip where everything is just different. A lot of these changes don't seem to be for the better either. The pacing feels a lot slower, and the dialogue and jokes don't hit nearly as often as it used to. The episode ideas are much less creative in comparison to the first couple of seasons. The heavier focus on serialized stories doesn't lend itself to the kind of format the series goes for. The animation quality seems to be noticeably cheaper. The complete redesign of everything feels so off-putting, and people coming from the earlier seasons would probably be very confused as to what's going on. A lot of the best side characters stopped showing up as often. In fact, they even wrote out the CEO entirely halfway through the season, and the new characters we do get, Becca and Roy, aren't really as charming as the original side characters. Though I do like the direction they tried to go with them, with Becca becoming Angela's friend, who has an opposing personality to hers, and Roy being a sort of Ned Flanders-like figure to Tom, except he has a dark secret. Ooh. Honestly, with the way I describe it, it seems like the show is completely bad at this point, but... Actually, there are no buts. It's honestly a way more boring experience overall now. Buts. It may not seem like much, but these changes add up and diminish the overall quality of the show. The Talking Tom TV show, I still can't get over that. Like I said earlier, the episode ideas are way less creative, and the ones that stand out are held back by the fact that they feel very similar to episodes we've seen before. And if you look at the Talking Tom and Friends fandom wiki, which I used to gather a lot of the information for this video, you can see that a lot of the writing staff was cut out starting from season 4, once again tracing back to the speculated budget cuts. This likely means that all the best writers and directors from the earlier seasons had to leave as a result of the cuts, leaving only a few people for the later seasons. When I was gathering episodes to sample for this review, because I'm not watching all 160 of them, barely any of the episodes from season 4 onwards grabbed my attention beyond the ones that introduced the new characters Becca and Roy. In fact, for season 5, all the episodes I picked were about Roy. I'm pretty sure he's a central part of this entire season. Actually, let's talk about these two characters. Becca is introduced in the fittingly titled Who is Becca?, an episode where Angela tries to make a response to a diss track that was made about her by Becca, but fails because she's too nice. She then asks the others to help her and makes a diss track that is so mean that it puts her out of business, but she feels bad about it. They then try to make it up to her, but oh no, she has to sing the diss track on Drama Alert or something. It's through this that we learn that Becca made the original diss track because Angela left a concert taking care of an injured fan and she got mud on Becca while driving off. What in the name of parasocial relationships? Okay, how about Roy? Well, Roy is introduced right off the bat in Season 5's premiere, Neighbor Roy, and oh boy, this episode spares no time to introduce the conflict to you, showing you immediately how Roy is stealing Tom's fame by being the nicest person in town, and it establishes Tom's rivalry with Roy, suspecting that his niceness is just an act to hide his real motives. It's incredibly weird how much the town worships Roy, to be honest. He literally just moved in and he's already like the biggest celebrity in town just for doing some random acts of kindness. Imagine if this town saw Mr. Beast. When Tom brings up his suspicions to his friends, they immediately shoot down this claim and insist that he's just a nice guy with no ulterior motives whatsoever. Yeah, sure, the guy dressed up as a literal burglar is a nice guy and their longtime friend is the crazy one. I can totally believe that. The amount of trust they have for Tom once Roy gets into the picture, it feels super out of character for like everyone else. What happened? Unsurprisingly, it turns out that Tom was right the entire time and Roy was actually a bad guy. The entire series just ends on a cliffhanger with their house being destroyed after they find out Roy's secret. I'm pretty sure there was a season 6 planned, but it definitely isn't happening now for multiple reasons. One, the budget was continuously decreasing and they just probably couldn't bother making any more. 2, the show went on for way longer than it needed to and the team were running out of ideas by this point. And 3, Talking Tom is nowhere near as relevant as it once was, so the show's sole purpose is basically void now. And thus concludes the Talking Tom and Friends TV show, a show that the team behind it clearly cared way too much about considering its sole reason for existence. Closing out, Talking Tom and Friends was a pretty decent kids cartoon that declined in quality as it went on. It's a story you've seen many times before in the world of animation, and it will probably continue to happen in the foreseeable future. I think it's a little sad that the show ended so unceremoniously and on a cliffhanger, but I'd honestly rather have that than let the show continue to decline. At least they knew when to stop before it was too late. Would I recommend you go out of your way to watch this show for yourself? Maybe ironically, or with friends, or if you're high, or all of the above. But if you're watching it with a younger sibling or something like that, then yeah, it should be a decent time. Hell, I only found out about this show because I saw my sister watching it. The show isn't anything groundbreaking, but there were a few things I liked when I saw it myself. You know, if I had a nickel for every time there was a funny cartoon cat that was popular for its time that excelled to icon status because their creator sold out, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but you know how the saying goes. Seriously, it's weird how similar the stories of Talking Tom and Garfield are. Before I started work on this video, I actually asked some of my friends if they've seen the Talking Tom show, and a lot of them had good things to say about it, surprisingly. A lot of them talked about how it was a childhood show of theirs and how it was one of their favorites growing up, which is pretty cool, and I can totally see why. It's a perfectly fine show for kids, and it genuinely feels like there's passion behind it, and sometimes perfectly fine is all a show needs to be. Compared to other popular shows at the time, Talking Tom and Friends stood out at first by combining elements of episodic comedy, serialized stories, and even some reality TV. As it went on, it lost a lot of what made it unique, losing its appeal due to budget cuts and changing hands. At the end of the day, though, the Talking Tom TV show is a unique adaptation of a novelty mobile app that was designed to sell mobile games, and it surprisingly has a heart. It's no Lego movie, but I can tell that the people working on the show had a lot of fun. In fact, now that I've seen the show, I think I'm gonna go try the original Talking Tom app just to see what all the hype was about. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Tom.
You're an idiot.
You're an idiot.
Fuck this app.